"She'll forget her password anyway," my daughter said, not knowing I was still awake. It was late. I was in bed, lights off, door cracked open just a bit. Amanda stood in the hallway, speaking to her husband in that low, dismissive tone she reserved for when she thought I couldn't hear. I heard. Every word. Earlier that day, I'd asked her to help me log into my online banking. Not because I couldn't do it, but because the two-step authentication had changed again, and I was tired. She sighed, took my phone, muttered something about outdated systems and reset everything, including the password. Then she tapped a few things and walked off with her usual, "There, fixed." I didn't say anything, not then. At 78, silence becomes your survival instinct. You learn not to push too hard, not to ask again when someone rolls their eyes, not to make a fuss when someone forgets you asked to see your own statement. You smile. You thank them. You pretend it's fine. That's the agreement. That's how you're allowed to stay involved, by being quiet about the parts that hurt. But I wasn't always like this. I used to run a small antiques shop in our town. It wasn't big, but it was mine. I tracked every invoice, every dollar. I knew when something was off by 10 cents. After my husband passed, I managed everything. The house, the bills, Amanda's college loans, and later, her first mortgage. She cried on my couch more than once, thanking me for always knowing what to do. I did know. I still do. It's just that somewhere along the way, Amanda started thinking that knowing meant controlling. The shift was slow. First came the helpful suggestions. Why not let her manage my insurance renewals? She could call the cable company. It's too much of a hassle. She'd handle the subscriptions, the reminders, the passwords. You shouldn't have to worry about these things at your age. At first, it sounded kind, even loving. But kindness turns sharp when it's laced with control. And love, real love, doesn't talk about you in past tense while you're still sitting at the dinner table. That night, in the hallway, Amanda didn't whisper. She didn't need to. She doesn't check her statements. I've streamlined everything. It's just easier this way. Her husband asked something in return. I couldn't catch it all. And she laughed. Trust me, if I asked her to log in right now, she wouldn't even know where to start. And that's when something in me, something I thought I'd lost, woke up. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, as the room darkened around me. My laptop was in the den, charger tucked under the table. I knew the bank's website by heart. I knew my account number. I knew what Amanda had changed, and I knew what she hadn't touched. Not yet. In the morning, I made her tea. Let her complain about gas prices and politics and the new neighbor's cat. I nodded, smiled, asked nothing. She left by noon, taking a phone call as she backed out of the driveway, not once looking up at me. I waited until her car was gone, then went straight to the den. The login page was the same. The password wasn't. I tried the one she'd always used, the one she once said was just easier to remember. And I got in. The screen lit up with balances and transfers and pending authorizations I hadn't approved. My breath caught. One transfer, scheduled for Friday, would send $38,000 to an account I didn't recognize. The name on the recipient matched Amanda's middle name. She wasn't just managing things, she was moving them. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I didn't rage. I opened a notebook. I started writing. Dates, amounts, notes. I printed what I could. I highlighted. I made copies. Then I called my lawyer. Let's just say Amanda was in for a different kind of login surprise, and not the one she'd prepared. Amanda's voice on the voicemail was sugary sweet, the kind she used when talking to store clerks or realtors. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Let me know if you need anything, okay? Love you." I didn't call back. Instead, I went back to the printouts. There was a pattern. That's what struck me first. Every month, like clockwork, there were small withdrawals, $180 here, $250 there, all labeled under vague names. Home maintenance, monthly services, support transfer. It had started almost a year ago. Harmless amounts at first. Nothing that would raise alarm. But then, 5 months ago, the numbers began to grow. The $500, $3,200, a $12,000 wire to an investment partner whose name I didn't recognize. It was theft. But clever theft. Quiet theft. Amanda had always been clever. She wasn't like me, never interested in the old ways, never patient with paperwork or details. But she knew how to talk. She knew how to make you feel foolish for asking too many questions. "You don't need to worry about that, Mom. I've got it handled. Trust me." I used to trust her. I remember the first time she asked me for my banking login. It was during the pandemic. I'd been sick with the flu. Not COVID, just a bad case of something. And I was too tired to sit up. She brought soup and tissues and hovered like a nurse. "I'll just log in for you. I'll make sure the bills are paid." I gave her the password that day. That was 3 years ago. Since then, she'd gradually taken over every single access point in my life. Electricity, insurance, car registration, even my voter registration. "It's all online now, Mom. Let me handle it." At first, I thought I was lucky. I heard horror stories from other women at the center. Children who never called, who lived across the country, who left their mothers alone in crumbling houses. Amanda lived 15 minutes away. She brought groceries. She watered my plants when I went to the doctor. She texted back. But kindness isn't love if it comes with strings. And lately, the strings felt like ropes. I remembered something my husband, David, once said. He was a quiet man, full of old-fashioned decency. "Mildred," he told me one morning, "love without respect is just obligation in disguise." He died 9 years ago, and I hadn't thought of that sentence in ages. Until now. By the end of the day, I'd gathered everything. I had a full ledger, printed transactions, statements, screenshots with timestamps, a manila folder thicker than any I'd held since closing the shop. I even printed an email Amanda had sent to the bank requesting that all communication be redirected to her email using my name. Fraud. Quiet, manipulative, well-dressed fraud. I called the bank the next morning. "Mrs. Collier." The voice on the line was warm but cautious. "We have your daughter Amanda as your primary contact on file." I smiled, though they couldn't see me. "Well, darling," I said, in the steadiest voice I had, "she's about to be removed." It took 3 hours, a notary, and 2 security verifications. But by noon, Amanda's access was suspended. Temporarily, just enough to make her wonder, to rattle her rhythm. I didn't tell her, not yet. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Judith Wallace, attorney at law. A sharp woman with silver hair and a steel spine. She was a friend of David's sister, and I hadn't needed her in decades. But when she picked up the phone, I didn't even have to explain much. "You've got receipts?" she asked. "Dozens." "Then come in tomorrow. We'll prepare the first filings." "Filings?" I asked, heart quickening. "If your daughter has submitted documents in your name," Judith said calmly, "we need to get ahead of it, before she tries to declare you unfit." I paused. "She wouldn't..." But even as I said it, I knew better. Judith was silent on the line for a second. Mildred, she said gently, you're not the first mother I've helped, and you won't be the last. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my kitchen, tea growing cold beside me. My house was tidy, the sun bright through the window. Nothing looked out of place. But everything had shifted. My daughter, the baby I once rocked at 3 a.m., the girl who cried over scraped knees, the woman I helped through divorce, was now building her life on top of mine. And I was done pretending not to notice. The password didn't work. I tried it again, carefully, slowly, just in case I'd mistyped. Still nothing. The screen blinked red. Incorrect credentials. Please try again. I stared at it for a moment, then reached for my notebook. I had written it down. I knew it by heart, but I wanted to be sure. Wanted proof that it wasn't just me making a mistake. Typed it one last time. Denied. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. That would come later. Instead, I sat back, closed the laptop, and exhaled like I was emptying a drawer I hadn't opened in years. I called Amanda. Hey, Mom, she answered, too brightly. Everything okay? The password's changed, I said. A pause. Then, oh, yeah, I had to update it. The bank was acting weird and I didn't want you to get locked out again. I wasn't locked out, I said quietly. I logged in just 2 days ago. Well, she said, voice tight now. They changed something with the security. I had to fix it. You didn't tell me. I meant to. I've just been swamped. You know how it is. I didn't respond. You don't need to worry about all that, Mom, she went on. Really. I've got it under control. You said it yourself. Those online systems are frustrating. You always forget your codes. I've forgotten one code. Once, I said. A beat of silence. I'll write it down for you next time I'm over, Amanda added, with a calmness that grated. It's not a big deal. But it was. It was a very big deal. She had locked me out of my own account. With a smile, like it was housekeeping. I spent the rest of that day in a strange state. Not angry, not exactly. It was something colder, like standing outside your own house, realizing someone's changed the locks and left your name off the mailbox. It wasn't about the password. It was about the lie. The way she said, you always forget, like it was a fact. Something agreed upon, like I had slipped into a new category. The forgetter, the helpless, the managed. But I was not helpless. And I had not forgotten. When Judith called me the next day, her voice was brisk. We've reviewed the preliminary documents. Your daughter has filed an internal directive with the bank, claiming she has power of attorney. My stomach dropped. She what? She filed it in May. Says you gave it to her for emergency purposes. I did no such thing. I believe you, Judith said, but the bank believes paperwork. I didn't remember signing anything. I would have. I'd always read the fine print. But then again, Amanda was clever. Documents slid under casual conversations. Just sign here, Mom. It's for the insurance. Initial there, it's the plumbing warranty. I never thought she'd trick me. But she had. Judith continued. She's listed as your financial proxy. If she tries to make further transfers or change investment structures, the bank may not even notify you. But I'm not incapacitated, I said. And we're going to make that very clear, Judith replied. But we need to move fast. She's already requested a hearing. Claims there's been increased confusion on your part. She's pushing for formal guardianship. My body went cold. Guardianship. That wasn't just control. That was ownership. That was what they do to people in nursing homes when no one's left to speak up. That was the legal declaration that I, Mildred Collier, was no longer capable of running my own life. And it was my daughter who wanted it. Not for my sake. For hers. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call. I thought about the moments I'd missed. The little warnings. How Amanda had started speaking about me instead of Tome. How she corrected me in front of her friends. She forgets things, she'd say with a laugh. Mom gets confused. But I wasn't confused now. I was furious. That night, I opened the filing cabinet in the back hallway. Inside were the papers I'd kept for decades. Tax forms, sale deeds, medical records, account statements going back to the year we bought the house. Amanda always joked about my paper hoarding. But I knew one day I'd need them. I pulled out the thick brown envelope with our original family trust, the one David and I set up before he passed. Amanda's name was in it, yes, but so was mine, and mine came first. She'd forgotten that part, and I was about to remind her. The folder was heavier than I remembered. It had that musty smell of ink and decades, the scent of things that matter. Paper doesn't age like people do. It gets brittle, yes, but never uncertain. It never forgets its purpose. Inside were the documents David and I signed together at Delaney and Hurst, the law firm on 5th. I remembered that afternoon clearly. The way David insisted we both be named equally on everything. We built this together, he told the lawyer. Nothing should pass to Amanda or anyone else unless Mildred says so. He was always like that. Protective, steady, stubborn in the right ways. The trust named me as primary trustee and Amanda as successor, not co-manager, not joint decision-maker, only if I were unable, physically or mentally, to continue. And yet, here we were, with Amanda submitting filings as if I'd quietly ceased to exist. I laid the documents out across the table like puzzle pieces, smoothing the edges with the flat of my palm. I opened my notepad. Page 1, Assets. Page 2, Known Transfers. Page 3, Timeline of Amanda's access. I underlined one sentence in the trust agreement, twice. This trust shall be managed solely by Mildred Collier, unless she is formally declared incapacitated by a medical authority and confirmed by court order. Not an email, not a family dinner, not Amanda's opinion, a court order. Judith called later that day to confirm the hearing date. It's sooner than we thought, she said. 2 weeks. She's pushing it fast. Because she knows time works against her, I replied. She's assuming you'll stall. I won't. There was a pause. Do you want me to be blunt? Judith asked. Always. She's going to paint you as forgetful, emotionally unstable, and confused. She'll say she took over out of concern. She'll cite vague incidents. If she has a doctor willing to sign off, it could get messy. Let it get messy. We'll need to show competency. Real evidence. Can you walk me through your daily routines, medications, any recent health evaluations? I smiled faintly. I take 1 pill a day, low-dose statin. I walk every morning. I cook every meal I eat. And I still know the birthday of every person in our family, including her ex-husband. Judith laughed. Perfect. Let's get you evaluated anyway. Independent cognitive test, just to bulletproof the case. I'll set it up. After the call, I made tea. Not because I needed it, but because I needed the ritual. Pour, steep, wait. There's comfort in order. The world can fall apart around you, but if the water's hot and the cup is steady, you're still yourself. Amanda texted me that evening. Hey, Mom, just checking in. Let me know if you need anything at the store. I can swing by tomorrow. I didn't reply. Let her wonder. The next day, I walked 2 blocks to Dr. Reynard's office. Judith had arranged the appointment quietly. He was a spry, no-nonsense neurologist with a handshake like sandpaper and a voice that cut through pleasantries. Here for the "Are you crazy on test?" he asked, eyes twinkling. Apparently, I replied. He gave me memory tests, logic puzzles, dexterity challenges. I aced every one. When I finished, he nodded. Mildred, you've got better recall than half my staff. Your file's clean? No red flags. Will you testify to that? Gladly. I walked home with the paperwork tucked under my arm like armor. On the porch, the wind had scattered dry leaves across the steps. I didn't brush them away. I liked the sound they made when I walked through. Sharp, crackling, unmistakable. Amanda showed up unannounced 2 days later. I saw her car before I heard the doorbell. Silver SUV. Always spotless. She knocked like she owned the house. I opened the door and stepped aside, letting her in without a word. She looked polished. Neutral sweater, carefully careless hair, faint perfume that smelled like money and detachment. Hey, Mom, she chirped, too brightly. I was in the area. I said nothing. She walked in, eyes scanning the room like she expected change, or maybe damage. She didn't sit. Everything okay? She asked. I tilted my head. Why wouldn't it be? Well, she smiled nervously. You haven't replied to my messages. Just wanted to check in. You've already checked into my accounts, I said calmly. What else do you need? Her face froze. I don't know what you mean. No? Mildred. She tried a softer voice. You know I've only ever tried to help. I was just trying to protect you. By removing my access? By filing for control of my life? She blinked. That's not... Look, you've been forgetting things. You left the stove on last month. I turned the stove back on because you brought me groceries I didn't ask for, and then insisted we use them up before they spoil. You're twisting this. No, I said, still calm. I'm remembering it. Amanda's mouth opened, then closed. I watched her struggle, not with guilt, but with the dawning realization that her version of the story might not hold. I have a hearing next week, I told her. Her eyes narrowed. You what? Filed a counter motion, and by the way, you're off the trust. Effective immediately. You can't do that. I just did. She stood there, hands clenched, as if trying to decide whether to shout or cry. She did neither. Instead, she turned on her heel. I've done everything for you, she hissed as she walked out. Everything. No, I said to the closing door. You've done everything for yourself. His name was Lawrence Wynn, and I hadn't seen him in nearly 20 years. He was David's old business partner, back when they ran their small appraisal firm. A quiet, sharp-eyed man with a memory like a file cabinet and a deep distrust of anything digital. A man shouldn't rely on machines to remember his money, he used to say. I found his number in an old address book, tucked behind a dog-eared birthday card David had once written me. The number hadn't changed, and neither, it seemed, had Lawrence. Mildred, he said, his voice crisp even through the static of the line. I was wondering when you'd call. You were? I've heard whispers. Amanda's been reaching out to my accountant. I sat up straighter. Your accountant? She asked him last month if he'd be available to assist with her mother's estate transition. Said it was time to simplify assets before mental decline sets in. I closed my eyes. For a moment, everything went quiet. The room, the air, my own breath. as if even my lungs needed a second to absorb it. "She's getting bold," I said finally. "She's getting sloppy," Lawrence corrected. Too many assumptions, not enough tact. I told him everything: the password, the filings, the trust, the pending hearing. When I finished, he whistled low. "You've got a fight on your hands." "I know." "You're ready for it?" I paused, then said the truth. "I'm not ready, Lawrence. I'm done." He understood, didn't press. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "Bring copies of the trust. Let's go over every inch of it." The next morning, he arrived at 9 sharp, carrying a briefcase the size of a small suitcase and 2 steaming cups of black coffee. "No cream, no sugar," he said. "You still drink it like that?" "I do," I smiled. We set up at the dining table, where the morning light made everything look softer than it felt. He spread out the trust documents, tax returns, property records, and a legal pad filled with his tight, angular handwriting. "She's used your name in several financial inquiries," he said, pointing. "That's forgery if you didn't authorize them. And if she's initiated transfers under your trust without explicit permission, it's theft," I finished. He nodded. We spent hours building a timeline, not just of what Amanda had done, but when and how. The pattern was clear. She began slowly around the time I had mild pneumonia and stayed with her for a few weeks. That's when the first overlapping transfers appeared. Overlapping because she'd moved small amounts from one fund into another, then shifted the label on the original account. "It's called wash movement," Lawrence explained. "It looks innocent, but it's usually the start of laundering or consolidation for control." By the afternoon, we had what amounted to a full financial autopsy of Amanda's quiet invasion. "She's been planning this for at least a year," I said, staring at the paper trail. "Longer," Lawrence replied. "She was waiting for the right moment. Illness, confusion, anything that made you vulnerable." "But I'm not vulnerable." "No," he said, eyes steady. "You're dangerous now." He left just before sunset, with a promise to submit an affidavit to Judith. Before going, he paused in the doorway. "David would have been proud of you, Mildred, for not letting her finish what she started." I watched him drive away, then sat in the empty house with the folder still open beside me. I should have felt victorious, or at least vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Not weak, not afraid, just tired. It takes something out of you, discovering betrayal in someone you raised. There's no neat drawer to put that feeling in. It sits somewhere in your chest, unsettled, restless. You keep thinking back, to lullabies, to homework at the kitchen table, to prom night tears and whispered secrets between mother and daughter. You ask yourself when it shifted, and deep down, you already know. Amanda always admired power, but she never learned the difference between power and dominance. She thought control was safety. She thought if she ran everything, she'd be the one who couldn't be hurt. But love isn't safe, and motherhood isn't management. That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket across my knees and watched the last light leave the sky. A neighbor passed by walking her dog. She waved. I waved back. Inside, my phone buzzed. Amanda. I didn't answer. Let her feel silence for once. Let her wonder what comes next, because the next step was mine. The letter arrived folded in thirds, formal and sharp, like the tone it carried. Notice of petition for appointment of guardian, filed by Amanda Collier, on behalf of Mildred Collier. Due to observed cognitive decline and financial vulnerability. I read it once, then again. Every word was dressed in polite concern, the kind that only sounds tender until you realize it's being weaponized against you. Words like well-being, protection, stability. But underneath the legal polish, the message was clear. She wanted ownership of me, of my accounts, of the house, of my life. I stared at the letter on the kitchen table next to my teacup and half-finished crossword. Amanda hadn't called, hadn't warned me, hadn't said a word since the day I told her I knew what she was doing. Instead, she'd filed a formal request to have the court declare me incompetent. It's a strange feeling, realizing your own child has prepared an argument for why you shouldn't be allowed to make your own decisions. Judith called before I could pick up the phone myself. "I just received a copy," she said. "They filed it fast." She's using your age, her role in managing your affairs, and the fact that you've resisted help lately as grounds. "Resisted help?" I repeated. "As in, changed my password back?" "As in, tried to reclaim your life," Judith said. "They'll argue you're being paranoid, that you're lashing out because of fear. It's a common angle in guardianship cases." "But it's not true." "No," she said, "but it's persuasive, and that's what courts look for. Not always the truth, but the strongest version of it." She paused. "We'll need a formal psychological evaluation, and I want a geriatric care specialist on record, someone who can say clearly that you are not only capable, but actively managing your affairs." "And if we do all that?" "Then we win," Judith said. "Because once you show you're lucid, coherent, and acting in response to legitimate concerns, the entire narrative collapses." I took a breath. "Do you believe me, Judith?" There was no hesitation. "I do, and I've worked on enough of these cases to know when a daughter's concern is real and when it's convenient. Amanda is building a case around your silence, not your behavior. And now that you're speaking, her foundation is crumbling." The next day, I sat across from Dr. Lin, a geriatric specialist with soft eyes and sharp questions. She asked about my routines, my diet, my sleep, my memory. She gave me a series of tests, not the kind you can bluff your way through. I passed every one. "You're clear, Mrs. Collier," she said, signing the last page. "No signs of cognitive impairment, no memory disorder, no decline." I thanked her, then walked out into the bright, cold morning. The wind had changed. I could feel it in my bones. Amanda must have felt it too, because that evening she texted me. "Hi, Mom. I hope you're doing okay. I know things are complicated right now, but I really do care about you. We both want what's best." I stared at the message for a long time. No apology. No withdrawal of her petition. Just that slippery, well-practiced tone. One part daughter, one part defendant, trying to pre-plead her case. I didn't respond. Let her sit with that. 3 days later, I received a second letter. This one from the court. Hearing date confirmed. Room 207B, County Civil Courthouse. 1 week away. And at the bottom of the page, a note. Petitioner will present witness testimony. I blinked. Witness? I called Judith. "Who's she bringing?" "A family physician who hasn't seen you in 3 years and..." She sighed. "Her husband." "Her husband?" I almost laughed. "He claims to have observed erratic emotional behavior, that you're forgetful, agitated, and financially confused." I felt a pulse rise in my neck. "That man has spent maybe 6 hours in my home over the past year." "He'll still speak," Judith said, "and courts love a calm, confident spouse with a concerned tone." "Then I'll give them something else to love," I replied. I turned off my phone and went to the kitchen. I had work to do. There's a kind of calm that settles in after betrayal. Not the calm of acceptance. No, that's something else. This is colder, tighter. The kind that comes when you know exactly what's coming, and you've chosen to meet it head-on. That evening, I opened my laptop, entered the bank's website, used the new password. I clicked through each account, verified every balance, and then methodically, I began to mark the ones I'd freeze the moment the hearing began. Let her talk about my forgetfulness while I demonstrate in real time just how much I remember. The courthouse had high ceilings and cold light. Everything about it felt too big. The echo of footsteps, the sound of shuffling paper, the measured tones of people pretending they weren't about to change someone's life. Judith walked beside me as we entered. Her shoes clicked with quiet confidence. I held a leather folder in my arms, not too full, not too thin, just enough. "I'll do most of the talking," she said as we passed through security. "But the judge will likely want to hear from you directly. Don't worry, just speak clearly. You don't need to perform." "I'm not here to perform," I said. "I'm here to be seen." She nodded. Amanda arrived 10 minutes later. She wore a beige blouse, modest jewelry, and a carefully strained expression. Her husband walked one step behind her, holding a slim binder under his arm like he was auditioning for a role in a movie about integrity. They didn't look at me, which was fine. I wasn't here for eye contact. We were called into courtroom 207B at exactly 10:04 a.m. The room was simple. 2 tables, a bench, a few rows of wooden chairs. It smelled faintly of floor polish and paper. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a voice like polished brass, reviewed the files in silence for several minutes before speaking. Petitioner claims that the respondent, Mildred Collier, is demonstrating cognitive decline and requires formal guardianship. Is that correct? Amanda stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "On what grounds?" Amanda cleared her throat. "There have been several recent instances of forgetfulness, poor judgment with finances, and resistance to assistance. My husband and I have been managing her accounts for some time now. She often forgets appointments and passwords. We're concerned for her safety." I watched her speak. Every word measured, every glance timed. Her voice trembled in just the right places. She was good. I'll give her that. But I've been quiet long enough. Judith stood when the judge turned to us. "Your Honor, we dispute the characterization entirely. Ms. Collier has full cognitive capacity, supported by 2 recent evaluations. Moreover, we have evidence that the petitioner has used her access to conduct unauthorized financial transactions, including one scheduled transfer of $38,000. The judge blinked. "You're saying the petitioner misused the respondent's finances?" "Yes, Your Honor. Mildred Collier will testify to that herself." The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Collier, do you wish to speak?" I stood slowly. My knees weren't what they used to be, but they held. "I do, Your Honor." "Go ahead." I opened my folder, laid it flat, and turned the laptop I'd brought toward the judge. "This is my online banking portal," I said. "I change the password myself. No assistance. I log in weekly, sometimes daily. I've highlighted several transactions made without my consent." I navigated to the flagged transfers. My fingers moved steadily. No fumbling, no hesitation. I heard a quiet intake of breath from Amanda's table. "This transfer," I said, pointing, "was scheduled by my daughter to an account in her name. I did not authorize it. I have also brought printed statements with marked anomalies, as well as a notarized letter from Mr. Lawrence Wynn, my late husband's business partner, confirming my original financial intentions. The judge looked down at the screen, then up at Amanda. "Do you deny initiating these transfers?" Amanda stood, visibly flustered. "They were done under implied permission, Your Honor. I was helping manage her finances. She told me once." "I told you once to bring in the groceries," I interrupted quietly. "Not to take my money." The courtroom went still. Amanda's husband cleared his throat. "If I may, Your Honor." "You may not," the judge said, cutting him off. "We'll hear from you shortly." The judge turned back to me. "Mrs. Collier, do you feel you are capable of managing your own affairs?" "I do." "Do you feel you are being pressured or manipulated by your daughter?" "I feel I've been quietly erased from my own life." That silence again, heavier this time. The judge leaned back in her chair. "Thank you, Mrs. Collier. I've seen enough for today. We'll take a recess before hearing from the petitioner's witnesses." As I returned to my seat, I passed Amanda. She didn't look up, but her fingers tightened around her pen like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Judith leaned in and whispered, "You just changed the tide." But I already knew that. I hadn't come here to defend my competence. I came to reclaim it. After recess, the courtroom returned quieter. There was something different in the air. Not obvious, not loud. But I saw it in the bailiff's posture, in the way the judge glanced at me more deliberately. Even Amanda's lawyer had stopped smoothing his tie. The tone had shifted, not in my favor, not yet, but no longer against me. Amanda was called to the stand. She walked slowly, as if rehearsing calmness with every step. Judith leaned over. "Listen carefully," she whispered. "She'll pivot. Watch for the word concern. It's the mask they wear when control slips." Amanda was sworn in, her voice soft, measured. "I love my mother," she began, "and everything I've done has been to help her. I never meant to take anything away from her." Judith barely moved. "There it is," she murmured. "Concern." "I noticed changes over the past year," Amanda continued. She'd forget things, leave the stove on, misplace mail. She once left a window open during a storm. The living room was soaked. "She opened that window for ventilation," I whispered. "I closed it myself." "She refused to go to the doctor. She ignored important documents. I only stepped in to help when she seemed unable to handle it herself." "Did you consult her before transferring money?" the judge asked. Amanda hesitated. "Not formally," she admitted. "But she trusts me. Always has." "Did she authorize you to submit a power of attorney document?" Another pause. "She signed something, yes. It was during her recovery from pneumonia. She was tired. She told me, 'Just handle it.'" "I assumed—" "You assumed," the judge interrupted, her voice flat. "But you did not have formal, documented consent?" No. But I believed it was in her best interest." There it was again. Best interest. A phrase that sounds kind, until it strips you of your voice. Judith stood when it was our turn. "No further questions," she said simply. Amanda blinked. She expected a trap. We gave her none. Next came her husband. He offered a few vague stories, emotional episodes, difficulty recalling dates, confusion about family events. The judge asked for specific incidents. He offered none, just tone, just worried smiles and phrases like, "It just didn't feel safe anymore." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. They were already crumbling under the weight of their own vagueness. Then the judge called for my witness, Dr. Lynn. She entered with a quiet authority, file in hand. She testified clearly. Mildred Collier demonstrated full cognitive capacity. No signs of impairment, no red flags. She described me as organized, alert, and articulate. Judith followed with a final question. In your professional opinion, is there any basis for the claim that my client is unable to manage her finances? None whatsoever. Amanda looked down at her hands. The judge spoke last. Court is adjourned for today. I will issue my ruling in 3 business days. I stood, gathered my things, and left the courtroom without looking back. Outside, the sky had clouded over. Judith walked beside me in silence until we reached the bottom of the courthouse steps. She's going to lose, she said. She knows it. I nodded. That's not the part that hurts. I know. We paused before parting. I watched the people pass. A woman with a stroller, a man arguing into his phone, 2 teenagers holding hands, unaware of the weight of time. I spent years thinking silence was grace, I said. That if I endured quietly, it meant strength, dignity. But it just made me invisible. Not anymore, Judith said. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. That evening, Amanda called. I let it ring. She texted an hour later. We need to talk, please. But there was nothing left to talk about. Some bridges don't burn. They collapse slowly, beam by beam, word by word, until all that remains is a polite wave across an unspoken distance. And sometimes, that distance is the only safe place left. I didn't wait for the ruling. I didn't need to. By the next morning, I'd already met with Richard Holt, my banker for the past 7 years, a meticulous man with a salt and pepper mustache and a habit of pausing before he spoke, like he was always measuring twice before cutting once. We sat in his private office, the blinds drawn halfway. He looked at the folder I handed him, filled with legal documents, doctor's letters, notarized statements. Then he looked at me. I have to say, Mrs. Collier, he said, you've built a very clear case. I've had practice, I replied. He chuckled, gently, not mockingly. What would you like to do? I want every single access Amanda has revoked, permanently. Her name, her email, her authority. I want her gone from every profile, every emergency contact list, every viewing permission. Understood. And I want all pending transfers frozen. Already done, he said. We caught them in time. Nothing's left the accounts since your password change. Good. He typed for a while, then turned the screen toward me. These are your primary accounts. Would you like to assign a new secondary contact? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. My granddaughter. Her name is Julia Witt. She's of age? Just turned 22, pre-med, responsible, thoughtful, and, most importantly, she listens. Richard nodded, noting the name. I continued. I'd like to open a separate trust in her name, a future fund. The same money Amanda tried to transfer. I want it redirected. To Julia. Yes, with staggered release over the next 10 years. For tuition, health expenses, whatever she needs. But not all at once. I want her to learn how money works, how trust works. And Amanda? I paused. Nothing formal, no lawsuits, no charges, just distance. I understand. He clicked a few more keys, printed a few forms. I signed each one slowly, carefully, the way David taught me. Read first. Never rush. If they try to hurry you, that's your answer. When we finished, Richard leaned back. There's one more thing, he said. Something I suggest to clients when things get complicated. He opened a small drawer and pulled out a slim, black envelope. This is a lockout clause. If someone tries to access your accounts in the future without your consent, Even with false paperwork, the system will auto-freeze all transactions until you approve it verbally, in person, with two-factor identification. Like an alarm system? Exactly. I'll take it, I said. He handed me the pen. I signed. And just like that, the locks were mine again. That evening, Julia came by. She always called first. Always knocked softly. She brought her favorite ginger tea and a bag of apples. The good kind. The kind that smell like actual fruit and not wax. We sat in the kitchen, the way we always did. No rush. No need for big speeches. After a while, I slid the new folder across the table. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Your name's on it," I said. "Open it." She flipped through it slowly. Her eyes widened. "Grandma, I don't... This is... Are you sure?" "Yes. But what about..." "It's not a reward," I said. "It's a responsibility. And a message. You were the only one who ever asked me how I was doing without expecting a favor in return." Her throat caught. She set the papers down and reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "I'll take care of it," she said. "I promise." "I know." We didn't talk about Amanda, not directly. But Julia knew. She always knew more than she let on. I could see it in the way she tilted her head, the way her eyes scanned the room, like she was checking for bruises without asking where they came from. Before she left, she hugged me longer than usual. "Call me if anything happens," she said. "Even if it's nothing." "It's never nothing," I smiled. After she left, I stood at the window and watched the street grow darker. There was a strange kind of peace in my chest. Not joy, not relief. Something steadier. Control. Not over others. Over myself. 3 days later, the ruling came in a white envelope with the state seal embossed in gold. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the kitchen table, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat with it like you'd sit with an old friend who's about to say something you already know. It wasn't dread I felt, not anxiety, just stillness, like the air before a summer storm, full of tension, but also clarity. I opened the letter with steady hands. Case number 4076. Petition for guardianship. Denied. The court's words were plain, almost dry. No evidence of cognitive decline. Respondent demonstrates full capacity for financial and personal decision-making. All prior arrangements initiated without formal consent are nullified. There it was. The official return of my name, my choices, my dignity. Judith called a few minutes later. She didn't ask if I'd read it. She knew. "I've already filed the revocations," she said. "Amanda no longer has any legal standing in your financial affairs." Good. She may try to reach out. You don't owe her anything, but I suggest you prepare for the apology tour. "She won't apologize," I said. "You're probably right." We hung up with no goodbyes. Judith wasn't a goodbye person, neither was I. I stood and looked around the house. Everything looked the same. The photos on the mantel, the old radio in the corner, the tablecloth David picked out before he got sick. But I wasn't the same. At noon, Amanda showed up. Not a call, not a text. She just appeared in my driveway, her car parked too neatly, as if careful positioning could erase everything that came before. I didn't invite her in. We stood on the porch. She held her purse like a shield, her expression shifting between tight politeness and something closer to panic. "I got the letter," she said. I said nothing. I didn't think it would go that far. I was trying to help. "You tried to erase me," I replied. "That's not help. That's theft with paperwork." She flinched. "I never meant to hurt you." "You did." Her voice trembled. I didn't know how to fix things. You were pulling away. I was pulling back, I corrected. There's a difference. One is fear. The other is self-preservation. Amanda looked down. I miss how things used to be, she said. So do I. She looked up, hopeful, but I shook my head. Missing something doesn't mean you get to rewind it. There was a long silence. Then softly, she asked, Is there any part of you that still trusts me? I didn't answer. Because some questions aren't requests. They're confessions. I guess that's my answer, she said, stepping back. You made your choice, Amanda. Now you have to live with it. She turned, walked back to her car, and drove away. No tears, no drama, just the quiet sound of doors closing, literal and otherwise. I stood on the porch for a while after she left, not out of sadness, out of necessity. I needed the fresh air, the weight of those months, her control, my silence, the courtroom, the documents. It all pressed against me like a second spine. But it was mine now, all of it. Mine to carry, mine to release. That evening, I wrote a letter, not to Amanda, not to the court, to myself. I folded it and placed it in the drawer beside David's old watch. The letter read, You didn't lose your mind. You found your voice. Don't let them take it again. The whispers started at church. Not loud, not cruel. Just the soft tones of people pretending not to stare. I caught them near the hymn books, near the coffee table in the lobby, in the pause between one woman's, How are you? And another's, Well, you know. Some didn't say anything at all. They just looked at me differently. One woman, Carol, who once complimented my lemon bars 3 weeks in a row, offered me a half smile and walked the other way. But others came closer. Miriam, from the Wednesday quilting circle, waited until we were alone in the kitchen, rinsing out mugs. I heard about what happened, she said, voice careful. I kept drying the cups. She filed papers, she went on. Tried to get control of everything? I nodded. She did. And you stopped her? I did. She was quiet for a moment. Then she placed her hand on my arm. Good, she said. It's about time someone said no to one of these grown-up children. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't angry. She was tired, worn down by something that sounded a little too familiar. She calls me 4 times a week, she added. Not to check on me, to check up on me. Always asking if I've paid the water bill, if I remembered my vitamins. I haven't forgotten a single bill in 20 years. You ever told her that? Once, she said. She cried for an hour. Said I made her feel unwanted. I smiled, faintly. That, too, sounded familiar. We didn't talk more about it. We didn't have to. Some things are shared silently, stitched into the air like thread between people who know better than to say everything out loud. Later that day, I went to the grocery store. It felt different, too. The cashier, a boy who used to call me Miss Mildred, suddenly offered to walk my bags to the car. Just in case, he said. In case of what? I asked. He stammered. You know, I just thought maybe... I'm not fragile, I said. I'm old. That's not the same thing. He nodded, face flushed, and handed me my receipt without another word. The assumption had settled in. That I was the woman who had almost been declared incapable. The woman whose daughter tried to intervene. The woman whose story was now part of some quiet neighborhood legend. But that was fine. Let them talk. I had things to do. At home, I cleaned the pantry, rearranged the spice rack, tossed a few cans of beans from 2016. Then I sat down and wrote a letter to Julia. Not legal, not formal. Just words. Words I wished someone had written to me when I was 22. You will inherit more than money. You will inherit silence, guilt, expectations, all disguised as love. Learn the difference. Keep your kindness, but never give it to people who weaponize it. I folded it, sealed it, and tucked it into the drawer where she'd one day find it. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the sun stretch across the lawn in long orange bands. The house was quiet, but not hollow. Amanda hadn't called again, and I hadn't expected her to. She was living in the space she created, a place where good intentions became excuses and consequences finally came to visit. I thought about her childhood, the scraped knees, the broken crayons, the bedtime stories. I never imagined we'd end up here. But motherhood doesn't promise a straight line. It only promises that love, once given, can't be taken back. Only changed. And mine had changed. Not into hate, but into distance. Measured, necessary distance, a line I should have drawn sooner. I hadn't been to the shop in over a decade. It stood just where I left it, wedged between a tailor's storefront and an empty bakery that never could keep a tenant. The sign, Collier's Antiques, was faded now, the gold lettering chipped and soft around the edges. But the windows were clean. Someone was still trying. I stepped inside. The bell above the door gave the same little chime it always had, high and thin, like laughter you don't quite trust. The new owner looked up from behind the counter. Young, late 30s maybe, buttoned shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a kindness in his face that hadn't hardened yet. "Can I help you?" "No," I said. "I used to own this place." He stood quickly. "Wait, you're Mrs. Collier?" "I am." He reached out, hesitated, then offered his hand. "I'm Dean Levers. I bought the business from the last couple 5 years ago. You've kept it nice." "Thank you," he said. I tried not to change too much. I walked slowly through the space. It was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just taller when I was younger, fuller, busier. But the layout was nearly the same. The old oak table in the center, the glass case near the register. The lamp I bought from that estate in Manchester still stood in the corner, flickering faintly. Dean followed me at a respectful distance. "I kept a few of your tags," he said. "Handwritten. Thought they were beautiful." They were just words. They had care in them. People noticed that. I paused near the back wall, where I used to keep the pocket watch cases. David had once spent 2 full weekends refinishing the glass shelves. "No one notices shelves," he said, "until they're cracked." I ran my fingers along the edge, still smooth. Dean spoke again, quieter now. "Your daughter came by a few months ago. Wanted to know if you had any unsold stock on file. Said she was clearing up your estate." I turned to him. "She said what?" He flushed. "I didn't give her anything. Something felt off. You weren't on any obituaries, so I figured you were still around." "Still am." She seemed surprised when I said that. I exhaled slowly. "Thank you," I said, "for trusting your gut." He nodded. Before I left, he reached under the counter and handed me something wrapped in soft cloth. "I think this belonged to you," he said. "Found it tucked behind the register last year. I didn't want to sell it." I unwrapped it. A small porcelain rabbit. Amanda's. She used to keep it near the window as a child, said it looked like it was watching people pass by. One day she dropped it. We glued it back together. The crack was still visible along its back leg, hairline, and faint. I stared at it for a long moment. then rewrapped it and placed it in my bag. Outside, the air was crisp. I walked down Main Street slowly, letting the wind tug at my sleeves. People passed me without recognition. I wasn't the woman from the courthouse here. I was just a woman with a bag and an old story, and that was fine. At home, I placed the rabbit on the windowsill, not as a memory, as a boundary. Something broken, yes, but kept on my terms. Later that evening, Julia called. She'd received the envelope with the letter I'd written, said she read it twice, said she cried. But good tears, she added quickly. It felt like, I don't know, like something I needed but didn't know I was missing. That's how truth works, I said. It shows up quietly, like rain on dry soil. She asked if she could visit this weekend. I told her yes, and this time, when I hung up the phone, I didn't check my bank account, didn't scan for alerts or watch the door. I just sat down, closed my eyes, and let the silence wrap around me. Not emptiness, not fear, just peace. The kind you earn when you stop defending your place in the world and simply take it back. I saw Eleanor at the market. She was standing near the honey display, comparing labels like they held secrets. I recognized her from the side, the slope of her shoulder, the tilt of her chin. Some people age like photographs left in the sun. But Eleanor, she aged like stone, quiet, unchanged in her posture, only softer at the edges. We hadn't spoken in over 6 years. Not since the bridge group dissolved, not since her son took her to live closer to proper care, as she'd put it. I heard whispers. That she came back. That the son moved out west. That she lived alone now, in the same house she fought to keep. She looked up, caught my gaze and froze for half a second. Then she smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't ask for forgiveness, just room. Mildred, she said. Eleanor. We stood like that for a moment. 2 women, older now, surrounded by jars and fluorescent light. Then, almost shyly, she stepped forward and touched my arm. I heard, she said softly. I didn't ask what she meant. She went on. Not from Amanda, from Helen. Her sister-in-law goes to your church. Said you stood up in court. Said it was something to see. It wasn't for show. I know that. Her hand was warm, her grip steady. She looked at me with eyes I hadn't truly seen in years. There was no pity in them, no awe, just understanding. Do you remember, she said, when I thought I was losing it? I nodded. With the utilities. She smiled. My son was moving bills around, trying to streamline things. I thought it was helpful at first. Then I realized I didn't know how much anything cost anymore. I couldn't even tell you how much water I used. Just that I was still thirsty. I remember. I tried to tell him I was fine, she said. He said I was being difficult, that I should be grateful, that other mothers would love this kind of support. I said nothing. She looked at the jars again, picked up one with a gold lid. I started hiding things, she continued. Passwords, cash, my own mail, like a child hoarding sweets. I know that feeling. I felt ashamed, she admitted, like I was betraying him. You weren't. I know that now. She placed the honey in her basket, then turned back to me. It meant something. What you did, she said. Even to those of us who didn't say it out loud. I felt something shift in my chest. Not pride, exactly. Just relief. Like someone had named a thing I'd been holding in secret. I wasn't trying to start anything, I said. Sometimes starting something isn't a choice, Eleanor replied. It's a response. We walked together for a while after that, not out of obligation, but rhythm. 2 women, side by side, not rushing, not pretending. She told me about her garden. I told her about Julia. We didn't talk about Amanda, but she understood the outline. At checkout, she looked at me again. "If you ever need someone to sit quietly with," she said, "you know where I am." I nodded, and then she was gone. That night, I sat by the window, the rabbit still on the sill beside me. Outside, the wind had picked up. I could hear it in the trees. That low, rustling kind of sound that makes you feel both safe and small. I thought about Eleanor's voice. I thought about how many women I'd known who slowly disappeared inside their own homes, not from age, but from being made to feel unnecessary. I made a promise to myself then, quiet but firm. I will not go softly, not into silence, not into someone else's version of love, not into false safety wrapped in sugar-coated concern. I will name what is mine, and I will not hand over the key again. The letter came from Amanda. Real envelope, handwritten name, no return address. The paper was thick, the expensive kind she always favored. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Still small, tight, slightly slanted like she was always holding something back. I sat with it for nearly an hour before opening it. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, but because I already knew. It was 3 pages long. The first 2 were apologies, not direct ones. No sentences that began with, "I was wrong" or "I hurt you." Just softer phrases. I didn't realize, I never meant. I thought I was doing the right thing. There were mentions of stress, of her marriage, of Julia's influence, and the complicated position she'd been put in. Nowhere in those pages was the word control. Nowhere was money. Nowhere was power of attorney. The 3rd page was shorter. She wrote, "I hope, one day, you'll see that I acted out of love, even if I made mistakes. I'll be here if you ever want to talk. If not, I understand." I folded the letter, didn't tear it, didn't burn it. Just placed it back in the envelope and tucked it in the drawer behind the porcelain rabbit. It could sit there with the other things I'd chosen not to carry anymore. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have words, but because I didn't owe any. Some letters are meant for the writer, not the reader. That week, Julia came over again. We made soup. She peeled the carrots too thick, and I teased her for wasting half the vegetable. She rolled her eyes and said, "It's your fault. You taught me." We laughed like it wasn't borrowed time. After dinner, we sat outside with mugs of mint tea and watched the sky fall into that soft September dark. She asked cautiously, "Did you read the letter?" "I did." "Are you okay?" "Yes." She nodded, satisfied. Then, after a pause, "Do you want to talk about it?" I looked at her. Really looked. Her face so open, so unlike her mother's. Not because Amanda was cruel, but because Julia hadn't learned to armor herself with excuses yet. "No," I said gently. "I don't." She didn't press. We sat in the quiet, 2 women from 2 generations, both learning that silence can mean peace just as much as it can mean pain. Sometimes it depends on who's holding it. The next day, I went to the bank alone. Not for anything urgent, just to look. The teller recognized me, asked if I needed help. "No," I said. "I just want to see it for myself." He nodded. I logged in on the public terminal, entered my password, and watched the screen flicker to life. Balances, correct. Transfers, frozen. Access, mine, all mine. I printed a copy of the statement, folded it, and placed it in my purse. Not because I needed proof, but because keeping proof is what got me here in the first place. That night, I cooked for one. I set the table anyway, fork, knife, napkin. No one was coming over. There were no guests, no court date on the horizon, no reason at all, except that I still existed. And existing, I'd learned, deserved ceremony. I poured a small glass of wine, lifted it once to the quiet room, and whispered, not like a wish, but like a verdict, to the version of me that nobody erased. The phone rang on a Sunday. I let it go to voicemail. It wasn't Amanda, not this time. It was the lawyer, not Judith, but someone from her office following up on the formal close of the guardianship case. Just confirming, he said, that all related documentation has been sealed. The ruling is final. Nothing remains contested. I listened once, then deleted it. Some endings don't need archiving. That afternoon, I sat by the window and looked out at the maple tree David planted the year Amanda was born. It had grown tall, taller than the house now, its branches wide and quiet, the way trees get when nobody's watching them grow. I'd thought of cutting it down once, after he passed. It blocked the view, I told myself, but really, it just hurt to see something still standing. I was glad I'd left it. That evening, I walked to the mailbox. A thin envelope waited for me. No return name. Just Collier in the top left corner. Her husband's last name, not mine. Inside was a check. $5,000. No note, no memo. Just a sum, a gesture, perhaps, or a bribe. Maybe even guilt, reduced to numbers. I stood in the hallway for a long time, holding it. Then I turned, walked to the shredder and fed it through. Let her learn, the way I did, that not all silence can be bought. I made tea, sat down, and for the first time in months, opened my photo albums. Not to remember her, but to remember me. There I was, at 24, holding newborn Amanda in the hospital. At 36, standing beside David in front of the first shop. At 50, laughing in the garden with Julia on my lap. All the versions of myself that I had once been. All the women I had lived through. I ran my hand across the images, not in mourning, but in recognition. They were still in me, not gone, not ruined, just waiting. The next morning, Julia brought over a stack of brochures. Community classes, local writing groups, senior hikes. You don't have to pick one, she said, but maybe pick something. I'm not broken, I reminded her. I know, she smiled, but maybe you're done surviving. That landed differently. Later that week, I signed up for a memoir course, not to publish, not to impress, just to tell it, my story, my way. No one edits you when you're 80, they just listen. And maybe, if they're smart, they learn. So here it is then. My last quiet note. If you've ever been spoken over, talked down to, put in a corner dressed as concern, stand up. Even if it's shaky. Even if it's late. Because power taken can be returned. Dignity bruised can be rebuilt. And silence? It only owns you if you let it. If this story spoke to you, share it. Leave a comment. Or send it to someone who needs to remember their voice. We don't have to go quietly. Not anymore.